They say love can heal, but in some cases, it can also destroy. What happens when heartbreak turns to fury? When rejection fuels a deadly vendetta? Malik Reading thought his wedding night would mark the beginning of a beautiful new life. Instead, it became a night of terror, betrayal, and bloodshed, orchestrated by the two women he thought he had left behind. His past didn't just catch up with him, it gunned him down. Before we uncover the twisted web of love, lies, and lethal obsession, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more cases that will leave you speechless. Malik Reading was the kind of man who left an impression. At just 25, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen life's dark side, but refused to be consumed by it. Growing up in one of Florida's toughest neighborhoods, he had witnessed firsthand how easy it was to fall into the same cycle of crime and violence that claimed so many around him. But Malik was different. He had a plan, a future. Instead of becoming another statistic, he chose a path of discipline and order, becoming a correctional officer, a job that gave him structure, purpose, and the chance to prove to the world, and himself, that he was better than his circumstances. And then, he met Nyasia Cole. She was his fresh start, his redemption. At 23, Nyasia was everything he had dreamed of, driven, ambitious, and full of life. A medical student balancing brutal hours with relentless ambition, she embodied grace and resilience. With her, love was peaceful, easy, and without the ghosts of the past constantly lurking over his shoulder. Or so he thought. Malik may have been moving forward, but the past has a way of refusing to stay buried. He had two exes, two women who once believed they would be his forever. But unlike Nyasia, their love stories with Malik weren't fairy tales, they were battlefields. Zariah Whitfield was his first love. The kind of woman who loved hard, fought harder, and never walked away from a fight. Their relationship had been a roller coaster, passionate, toxic, and marked by fiery arguments and equally intense reconciliations. When she got pregnant, she believed Malik would be her happily ever after. Then there was Conti Banks, a woman just as fiery, just as possessive, and just as unwilling to let go. Both women carried felonies that had tainted their lives long before Malik tried to leave them behind. But neither Zariah nor Conti were the kind of women who accepted being replaced. And when Malik walked away from them, when he chose Nyasia, they chose revenge. What pushed them over the edge? What led them to turn his wedding night into a brutal execution? And how did one man's dream of a better future spiral into his worst nightmare? Stay tuned, because this story is only beginning. To the outside world, Malik Reading was a man who had climbed his way out of hardship, determined to carve out a life of stability and success. But what most people didn't know was that his past wasn't just something he left behind, it was something that would come back to destroy him. He had loved and lost before. He had made promises he couldn't keep, whispered dreams of forever to the wrong women. And now, on the night that was supposed to mark his happily ever after, those women were coming back to collect what they believed they were owed. For Zariah Whitfield, love wasn't just an emotion, it was an all-consuming force. She had fallen for Malik as a teenager, back when their love was still raw, intense, and untamed. She had given him her heart, her trust, and ultimately, pieces of herself that she could never take back. When she first got pregnant, she thought it was the beginning of their forever. But Malik had convinced her otherwise. They were too young, too broke, too scared. He promised her there would be another time, a better time. She had believed him. But when she got pregnant again, she was ready. Ready to be a mother. Ready to build a life together. And once again, he had talked her out of it. The weight of those choices, the sacrifices she made for him, never left her. And when he finally walked away, leaving her with nothing but memories, regrets, and the unbearable emptiness of what she had lost, something inside her broke. For Conti Banks, it had never been about love. Their relationship was built on wild nights, passion-fueled arguments, and fleeting excitement. But unlike Zariah, Conti never let go. She had given birth to their daughter, believing that maybe, just maybe, Malik would step up and be the man she needed him to be. But he had drawn his boundaries early. He was there for the child, but not for her. And that, Conti would never forgive. Both women had criminal pasts that stained their names. Zoraya had done time for aggravated assault after a bar fight turned violent. Conti had been arrested for fraud, running elaborate scams that once made her thousands, until she got caught. They weren't just Malik's exes. They were women who had lost too much and weren't about to lose again, especially not to Nyasia. When Malik announced his engagement, he thought it was a simple declaration of love. But for Zoraya and Conti, it was a declaration of war. He had promised them both a future, a family. He had told them they were his forever. And now, they were nothing but names in his past, while Nyasia got everything they had dreamed of. The fresh start. The fairy tale. The life they had once been promised. For Malik, this wedding was a new beginning. For Zoraya and Conti, it was the final betrayal. Some people forgive. Some people heal. But some wounds don't close, and some pasts refuse to stay buried. At first, it was just supposed to be a disruption. Zoraya and Conti wanted to ruin the wedding, humiliate Malik, and make sure his perfect day ended in disaster. But the moment Zoraya put the plan into motion, it started twisting into something far more sinister. She had always been the mastermind. Her rage had been simmering for years. She was Malik's first love, the one who had given him everything, and now he was tossing her aside like she never mattered. And Zoraya didn't just want to ruin his wedding. She wanted to end it. She convinced Conti that there was only one way to make Malik pay. That if they couldn't have him, no one could. And so, they armed themselves. And they waited. The wedding reception was filled with joy, laughter, and celebration. Malik and Nyasia danced under the twinkling lights, surrounded by family and friends. For a moment, it seemed like his past had finally let him go. But outside, in the shadows, his past was waiting. Zoraya and Conti arrived at the venue, masked by the darkness. They weren't there to talk. They weren't there to argue. They were there to finish what Malik started the moment he walked away from them. The first gunshot shattered the night. Guests screamed and ducked for cover as a storm of bullets tore through the air. Malik barely had time to react before pain ripped through his chest. Blood stained his white tuxedo, his legs buckled, and he collapsed, gasping for breath. Nyasia tried to run. But she didn't make it. A second shot rang out. Then a third. By the time the chaos settled, the bride and groom were dead. And the two women who had once loved Malik, the same women who had carried his children, had become his executioners. When the police arrived, Zoraya and Conti were still standing there, guns in hand. There was no escape. They hadn't planned on one. They had come to end Malik's future. And now, they would pay for it. Some say revenge is justice. Some say love is stronger than hate. But for Malik Reading, love wasn't enough to save him. And for Zoraya and Conti, love had turned into something far more terrifying. Something deadly. Did Zoraya and Conti act out of pure revenge, or was this a crime fueled by something deeper? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more shocking true crime stories. They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but what happens when two women share the same fury? From the moment Zoraya Whitfield learned about Malik's wedding, she knew, this wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about revenge. She wasn't going to let him walk into a new life, leaving her in the dust like she never mattered. No. She would make sure Malik Reading never got his fairy tale ending. She had been forced to watch him move on, build a future with another woman while she sat in the wreckage of what they once had. And with each passing day, her thoughts grew darker. The wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was her last chance to make sure Malik paid for leaving her behind. While Zoraya's anger had been simmering for years, slowly evolving into a calculated, cold-blooded plan, Conti Banks' rage was fresh, raw, boiling, and uncontrollable. Unlike Zoraya, Conti had always believed that she and Malik could fix things. That despite everything, he would eventually see that she was the right choice. Then, she saw the engagement announcement. It was a slap in the face. There he was, holding hands with Nyasia, smiling like he had never broken anyone's heart. Publicly flaunting a love she thought he could never feel for anyone but her. It was then that Conti snapped. She had spent years convincing herself that Malik still cared. But in that moment, watching him prepare to marry another woman, she realized something: she had never meant a thing to him. And if that was the case, then she would make sure he lost everything. At first, Conti was hesitant when Zoraya approached her. They had never been friends, just two women who shared the same man at different times. But the more they talked, the more their pain intertwined, the more their hatred fused into something unstoppable. And before long, Conti fell completely under Zoraya's spell. At first, it was just supposed to be a disruption. Zoraya wanted to ruin the wedding, embarrass Malik in front of everyone, and remind him that the past doesn't just disappear. But the more they talked, the darker the plan became. Zoraya was the strategist, the mastermind. She didn't just want to humiliate Malik. She wanted to break him. Conti, on the other hand, was the enforcer. She had always been impulsive, always been willing to get her hands dirty. And now, she was hungry for destruction. They started exchanging messages, venomous texts laced with anger, pain, and a thirst for revenge. Every conversation added fuel to the fire. At first, the plan was simple: cause chaos, ruin the moment. But soon, Zoraya realized that ruining the wedding wasn't enough. She needed to go further. She needed to end it. By the time the wedding day arrived, Zoraya and Conti were fully committed. There was no turning back now. Zoraya had meticulously planned every detail. She knew when the guests would arrive, what time the ceremony would take place, and most importantly, exactly when and where she and Conti would make their move. Conti had spent the night before practicing. Loading and reloading the gun. Making sure she was ready. Zoraya, ever the cold and calculated one, had picked the location. She knew where they could strike for maximum impact. They wouldn't just ruin the wedding. They would make sure Malik never saw his future. Inside the venue, Malik and Nyasia danced under twinkling lights. Laughter. Music. Love. For Malik, this was his new beginning. For Zoraya and Conti, it was his final moment. The first shot rang out, piercing the night like a scream. Chaos erupted instantly. Guests ducked, tables flipped, glasses shattered. Malik turned, eyes wide with horror, searching for the source of the gunfire. And then, he saw them. Standing in the entrance, guns in hand, eyes filled with nothing but hatred. Zoraya fired again. The bullet tore through Malik's chest. Blood bloomed across his white tuxedo, staining the fabric red. Nyasia screamed, clutching onto Malik, trying to keep him upright. But then, Conti pulled the trigger. The second shot hit Nyasia in the back. She stumbled. Fell. Malik, still gasping for breath, reached for her, but another shot rang out. And then another. By the time the smoke cleared, the bride and groom lay lifeless on the ballroom floor. The dream was over. The past had won. When police arrived, Zoraya and Conti weren't running. They stood there, guns lowered, staring at what they had done. There was no panic. No regret. Only the quiet realization that they had finally taken everything from Malik. He had taken their dreams, their love, their futures. So they had taken his life. Was this a crime of passion, or a premeditated execution? Did Malik seal his fate the moment he walked away from these women, or were Zoraya and Conti simply incapable of moving on? They had waited for this moment. Plotted every move. Planned every detail. For Zoraya Whitfield and Conti Banks, this wasn't about causing a scene, it was about destroying Malik Reading's life the way they believed he had destroyed theirs. They weren't just here to ruin a wedding. They were here to erase his future. They had spent too many nights drowning in their own rage, replaying every lie, every betrayal. They had watched Malik walk away from them, move on like their love had never mattered. And now, they would be the ones to leave him with nothing. Everything was perfect. The wedding had been a dream come true. A grand ballroom filled with love, laughter, and celebration. Music floated through the air, champagne glasses clinked, cameras flashed. It was the kind of night Malik and Nyasia had imagined for months, the kind of night that was supposed to mark the beginning of forever. But outside, in the shadows, a stolen black Dodge Charger sat parked just beyond view. Inside, two women sat in silence. Zoraya tapped her nails against the dashboard, her expression unreadable. But in her mind, the memories were sharp, clear, relentless. Every lie Malik had ever told her. Every promise he had broken. Every time he had whispered that she was his future, only to toss her aside. Beside her, Conti gripped the gun beneath her jacket, her fingers flexing against the cold metal. She didn't need to say much. Her rage was loud enough in the silence. They had come to do one thing. And nothing was going to stop them. At 6:45 p.m., a sleek white Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of the venue. The final touch to a perfect evening. The driver stepped out, moving with practiced precision, opening the door for the newlyweds. Malik was the first to step out. His tuxedo was pristine, his smile wide. He looked happy, like a man who had finally outrun his past. He reached out, extending his hand to Nyasia, his bride. She stepped forward, the soft glow of streetlights illuminating the delicate fabric of her gown. And that's when a voice sliced through the air like a blade. "So this is what we are to you?" "Nothing." Malik froze. The warmth of Nyasia's fingers slipped through his grasp. His heart slammed against his ribs. Because he knew that voice. It was a voice that had once whispered promises in the dark, that had once cried his name, begged him not to leave. He turned slowly. And there she stood. Zoraya. Half in the shadows, her eyes blazing with something unreadable. And beside her, Conti, silent, but dangerous. Her hand tucked inside her jacket. Gripping something. Something Malik couldn't see. But he knew. And Nyasia? She knew too. She didn't understand the details. She didn't know the full weight of Malik's past. But her stomach twisted, her breath hitched. Something was very, very wrong. "Malik," she whispered. He swallowed hard. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Z," he started, his voice careful. Measured. "What are you doing here?" Zoraya laughed. Sharp. Cold. "What am I doing here?" She repeated the question slowly, as if savoring it. Then her face twisted into something venomous. "You're really gonna stand there and ask me that, after everything?" Malik took a step forward, instinct. But Conti's hand twitched inside her jacket. His gut screamed at him to stop. "This ain't the time, Z," he said, his voice urgent. And that's when he saw the flash of metal. The first gunshot cracked through the air. Pain exploded through his shoulder. His body jerked back, slamming against the car. Nyasia's scream ripped through the night. Inside the venue, the guests froze. Laughter died. Champagne glasses slipped from hands, shattering on tables. The music cut off. And someone shouted, "Was that a gunshot?" Outside, Malik staggered. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining his white tuxedo. His vision blurred. But he forced himself to stay on his feet. To face them. Z, please. But Soraya wasn't listening. She was breathing hard, her hands trembling, but her grip on the gun never wavered. Nyasia was crying now, backing away, her hands outstretched. Please, we don't have to do this, she sobbed. Conti stepped forward. Her voice was ice. You never had to be here, Nyasia. And then, the second shot. It hit Nyasia in the back. She let out a soft gasp, and collapsed. Malik reached for her, dropping to his knees. But then another shot rang out. And then another. Until finally, it was over. When the police arrived, Soraya and Conti didn't run. They stood there, motionless, staring at the bodies. The guns hung limply in their hands. There was no screaming, no begging for mercy. No regret. Just the cold, empty realization that they had done what they came to do. They had taken Malik's future. Because if they couldn't have him, no one could. Some say it was passion that killed Malik. Some say it was revenge. But one thing is certain, love, when twisted by betrayal, can become more lethal than hate. And for Malik Reading, his past wasn't just something he could outrun. It was something that hunted him down, and pulled the trigger. As the smoke cleared and the echoes of gunfire faded into the night, the once joyous wedding venue had transformed into a scene of horror. Malik Reading and Nyasia Cole lay motionless. Blood pooled beneath them, seeping into the cracks of the pavement, a cruel contrast to the love they had celebrated just moments before. Inside the ballroom, the guests who had just been dancing, laughing, and raising toasts were now frozen in absolute terror. Someone let out a blood-curdling scream. Another fumbled with their phone, shaking fingers barely able to dial 911. The music had stopped. The celebration was over. And outside, the killers were already gone. Soraya Whitfield and Conti Banks moved like ghosts in the night, disappearing before anyone could even process what had just happened. The black stolen Dodge Charger sped away from the scene, its tires screeching against the asphalt, leaving behind nothing but death and devastation. Conti's hands were locked onto the steering wheel, her knuckles white from the grip. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. Soraya sat in the passenger seat, eerily silent. Staring straight ahead. Expression blank. For months, they had planned this moment. But now that it was over, it felt surreal. The weight of what they had done didn't bring panic or fear. It brought satisfaction. Conti glanced over at Soraya, expecting her to say something. To gloat. To laugh. To cry. But she didn't. She just breathed. The city blurred past them, streetlights flashing against the windshield. Their only thought now. Escape. Back at the wedding venue, police arrived within minutes. But by then, Malik and Nyasia were gone. The paramedics barely had a chance. Gunshot wounds to the chest, back, shoulder. Too much blood loss. Too much damage. A wedding that was supposed to symbolize love, commitment, and new beginnings had ended in a bloodbath. And now, Soraya and Conti were nowhere to be found. But not for long, detectives immediately knew this wasn't a random act of violence. This was personal. A targeted execution. The moment they saw the security footage from the wedding venue, it confirmed their suspicions. The camera had caught the stolen Dodge Charger speeding away from the scene, its taillights disappearing into the night. It didn't take long to track the vehicle's origin. Reported stolen just days before the murder. But the car wasn't the only lead. A bigger breakthrough came hours later. Conti's burner phone had been traced. Pinged off nearby cell towers. Not once. Not twice. But multiple times. Always near Malik's movements. Always too close to be a coincidence. And then, another crucial discovery. Text messages. A digital blueprint of the murder. Zoraya and Conti had documented everything. From the moment they decided to ruin Malik's wedding, to the final execution plan. It was all there. Every word. Every detail. There was no doubt. The police knew exactly who they were looking for. And the hunt was on. 3 days later, an anonymous tip led authorities to a rundown apartment in South Houston. Before dawn, SWAT teams moved in. Guns raised. Breath steady. They expected resistance. Expected a chase. But when they stormed inside, they found something they never expected. Zoraya and Conti weren't hiding. They weren't running. They were simply waiting. An officer later said, they didn't even flinch. It was like they didn't care that we were there. Zoraya was sitting on the couch, eating cereal. She didn't even put the spoon down. Just smirked, watching the officers approach. Conti. She was in the kitchen, cleaning a knife. As if it were just another day. The nonchalance stunned the officers. No remorse. No panic. No fear. Like they had been expecting this. Like they had already won. As they were led out in handcuffs, the cameras flashed, the reporters screamed questions. Why did you do it? Was it worth it? Zoraya just laughed. Conti didn't even look in their direction. They had done what they came to do. And in their minds, they had won. The trial that followed became a national spectacle. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. Zoraya and Conti sat side by side, unbothered. As if the fate of their lives didn't matter. The prosecution wasted no time. They painted the two women as ruthless, cold-blooded killers, driven by jealousy, fueled by revenge. They presented the security footage. The stolen car. The burner phone pings. The text messages plotting the murder. It was an airtight case. And when the jury was sent to deliberate, it didn't take long. They returned with one verdict. Guilty. Zoraya and Conti were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They never reacted. Never cried. Never apologized. And as they were led away in shackles, Zoraya smirked one last time. Because in her mind, she had still won. Malik never got his happily ever after. And that's all that mattered. Some say jealousy killed Malik. Some say revenge. But one thing is clear, his past didn't just catch up with him. It put a bullet in his chest. And for Zoraya and Conti, love was never about happiness. It was about possession. And when they couldn't have Malik, they made sure no one else could either. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more shocking true crime stories.